recording. So my name is Kristen, and I'm the outreach coordinator here at South Florida Wildlife Center. So for those of you that have never heard of our organization before, we are a nonprofit wildlife hospital that is located in Fort Lauderdale. We do have a mission to rescue and rehabilitate sick, injured, and orphan wildlife to eventually release them once they are healthy, and then educate the community about peaceful coexistence with our wild neighbors. So once a month, we host our wild lecture series and get different organizations to come in and educate us about the work that they are doing that is conservation, wildlife, environmental related. So we're really excited to have Joe Scarola and Lauren Maline with us here today from Ecological Associates, Inc. to discuss the light pollution impacts on sea turtles. So I'm going to let them take over. If you guys do have questions, feel free to drop them down into the chat and then we can relay them at the end. But other than that, I'm going to let them take over, and I'm going to spotlight you, Lauren, so everybody could see you. And you are good to go.
All right. Thank you so much, Kristen. And thank you to the South Florida Wildlife Center for having us today. We're really excited to do this presentation with all of you. It's really important that you guys joined us today. And if you're seeing this video after the fact, that's great too. You are already on your way to doing your part in sea turtle conservation and helping support our sea turtle species. So today we are going to discuss a few things. We're going to focus on the lighting pollution, but then we will be talking about some other things as well. Sorry, I'm actually having some technical difficulty. There we go. My slide changed. Okay. So first we're going to talk about who Ecological Associates is and what we do. We'll talk a little bit about some of the agencies that regulate some of the laws that are put in place to protect sea turtles, some of the big ones being the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we'll also discuss which turtles nest on our beaches here in Florida, some of the obstacles and threats that they face, the importance of the marine nesting habitat for these sea turtles, and then Joe will discuss the disorientations and what that means and the impacts of coastal lighting. So sea turtle nesting season actually already began last week. So it runs from March 1st through October 31st. So let's get into how you guys can make sure that you are being sea turtle friendly this summer. So what does EAI do? We do compliance monitoring, focusing on some of the projects that are called nourishment projects. So if you look at the photo here on the top left corner, that's what a nourishment project looks like. So these companies are pumping sand or hauling in sand with a truck and putting the sand up onto the beach to try to re-nourish the beach from some erosion that has occurred. On the right hand side there, you see our leatherback sea turtle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And that is our largest species of sea turtle. And you can see that that turtle actually came up kind of right into the project area there. So every night we monitor the construction site because this work happens 24 hours a day. So we go through the project area once every hour. We document if we see any nesting sea turtles. If we were to see a sea turtle laying her eggs, we would then remove those eggs from the work area and relocate them to another area so that there are no negative impacts to those sea turtle eggs. If for any reason the turtle would come up into the middle of the work site, we make sure that operations are ceased immediately so that we're protecting that nesting female as well. And sometimes, you know, the construction crew needs something like an escort, so we'll provide that so where they can go up and down the beach and drive down the beach safely without impacting these sea turtle species. In a minute here, you'll see a few more photos pop up of some of the work that we do. Okay, and so here are a few photos of other nourishment projects in different locations. You can see here that there is just a lot happening on the beach. So it's very critical that these companies do hire a permanent sea turtle monitor to make sure that there are no negative impacts to our sea turtles. So we do have a nourishment project that is going on right now in Martin County. We started monitoring for that project earlier in February, and so we have ongoing monitoring happening right now. So compliance monitoring is not the only thing that we do. We do the nighttime surveys as well as post-construction daylight surveys. And those surveys are very important. We will document all of the crawls and then make sure that we take GPS coordinates at those crawls. But there are a couple of other things that we do. As I mentioned, the nest relocations. So we make sure that we move those eggs from the work site and place them into a relocation zone so they're not impacted. We also do lighting evaluation surveys. Joe's going to go into a lot more detail about what this means towards the end of the presentation. But basically, these are conducted to assess the visibility of lights on the nesting beaches and see how the nourishment project has impacted those lights. So a lot of times when sand is placed on the beach, that will impact the elevation of the beach. And so maybe lights that weren't visible, at a different time, they become visible to those turtles. And so we need to make sure that we're monitoring that and bringing everything into compliance. We also have these escarpment surveys. So what an escarpment survey is just a survey monitoring for what we call scarps, which is that little area of erosion that you see there. It looks like a kind of a sand cliff where the turtle comes up. Sometimes these turtles will actually climb over the scarps and nest, and sometimes they hit those scarps and go back to the water, which is what we call a false crawl. So these surveys are performed after construction just to see how the beach is doing and if it's impacting those sea turtles. Some ways that you can get involved here's a couple of outreach opportunities that our organization offers, as well as many other organizations in Florida or just anywhere on the coastline that has nesting sea turtles. A lot of our nonprofit organizations are involved in programs like this. So we have sea turtle walks where you go out at night and observe a nesting female, public excavation programs where we dig out the contents of a nest and evaluate them after it's hatched, and then some hatchling releases where we release those hatchlings into the ocean. Other things, just like educational seminars or beach cleanups, they can be very valuable as well. So even if you are, watching this from an area that isn't part of our coastline, you can definitely do some online programs. Many of these programs will do like live streams on Facebook and social media and things like that. So all of these activities are permitted. That's very important to mention. If you look at this slide here, you will see that there are many protections put in place to help in the protection and conservation of our sea turtle species. So at the global level, we have something called CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. For anyone who's ever heard of the type of jewelry called turtle shell jewelry and things like that, turtles were hunted for making things like jewelry as well as for meat and eggs. So this limits the amount of trade and, forbids that from happening here in the United States and at a global level in between other countries. At the federal level, I'm sure most of you have heard of this. In 1973, we passed the Endangered Species Act. And this was critical for not only our sea turtles, but many, many imperiled species, different types of birds and different mammals, just to put extra protection in place for some of those populations that were declining. So at the state level, we then have the Marine Turtle Protection Act, and that is the agency that has those protections in place is the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, or FWC. So if you live in Florida, you've likely heard of FWC. They are the agency that issues our marine turtle permits. As I was mentioning, all the activities and all of the surveys we do are included under those marine turtle permits. And the marine turtle permit says that it's illegal to harm, harass, kill any sea turtles, hatchlings, or their eggs. So those are some laws that are put in place to help protect these turtles. Later, Joe will also probably mention some of the local county lighting ordinances, which is more of a localized way that we protect our sea turtles. And that focuses on their nesting habitat and just ways that we can make sure that those lights aren't impacting them. So we have 7 species of sea turtles that nest on our beach, or I'm sorry, 7 species of sea turtles worldwide. And then we have 3 species of sea turtles that commonly nest on our beaches. So if you look here from left to right, we have our green sea turtle, our loggerhead sea turtle, and our leatherback sea turtle. So let's go a little bit more into talking about each of these specifically. Leatherback sea turtles are listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. They are our first turtles to pop up on our beaches. So we see them nesting, even though sea turtle nesting season doesn't start until March 1st. We will have a few nests that are late in February most years, and then they nest into late June or early July. These turtles are characterized by having very large black bodies. They also, as you can see, have these white kind of splotches all over their body. And then you can't see it too well in these photos, but they normally have a kind of pink spot, a pinkish colored spot on top of their heads. So something that sets this species apart from other species of turtles is that they have a continuous layer of this thin rubbery skin, and that's over the top of their shell, which we call the carapace. This layer of skin, along with the fact that they are very, very large turtles, allows them to dive down to deeper depths. So you will see these turtles out in the open ocean, which means they are pelagic. That's the term that we use for that. They can weigh up to about 2,000 pounds, which is pretty big. If you have ever seen us surveying, I usually compare the size of a leatherback to the size of the ATVs that we ride on the beach, so they can even be larger than that. So it's really, really crazy to see these turtles come up nesting on our beaches. As I mentioned, they migrate for long periods of time, dive deep, and they eat a diet of jellyfish. So most of the leatherback sea turtles will be eating their body weight in jellyfish every day. We then have the loggerhead sea turtle. Loggerheads are listed as threatened. So you have endangered for the leatherback sea turtle and then threatened for a loggerhead. These are our most abundant nesters. So we get the highest density of nests from our loggerhead sea turtles each year in the state of Florida. They usually start to come towards the end of March to early April, and they'll stick around till about August. So they're here for a majority of the summer. These turtles are characterized by their very, very large head. You can see if you look at the photo on the top left, as well as the one right underneath it, their head in relation to their body size is just pretty huge. The head is just about the same size as the leatherback almost. And they are also characterized by a reddish brown carapace, which again is the top of the shell, and the skin has a bit of a yellow tint to it. Many times these turtles will have a lot of what we call epibiota on the shells. So that's like things like barnacles and algae growing on their shells because they tend to be a little bit of our lazy turtle. They sit at the bottom and rest a whole lot. So that allows for that growth to happen on top of their shells. Their large head and their very strong jawline allows them to crush prey items like crustaceans and mollusks. So they'll eat things like crabs and conchs and clams and those sorts of hard-shelled animals. Usually these turtles can weigh up to about 400 pounds, so even though they are smaller than the leatherback sea turtle or largest species, they are also still a very large turtle. The green sea turtle is listed as threatened as well. And these turtles are the last turtles to show up on our beaches. So they usually will appear in about May and they'll nest the whole way into October and sometimes even into November. So we have had green sea turtle nests that are still incubating, sometimes almost as close to Christmas Day. These sea turtles are characterized by a beautiful shell. Most of the time they have this starburst pattern that you see down at the bottom on those turtles. It's usually brownish, sometimes green or yellow tints in it as well. And these turtles were hunted for both meat and eggs and overfished by about 1900. So these turtles were not doing so well. There were many different conservation measures put in place. And since that time, the populations have really increased exponentially over the last few decades. So these turtles are doing fairly well at this time. They eat a diet of seagrasses and algae. So the green sea turtle actually gets its name from its body fat. So it's not that it eats the green algae and the green seagrass, it's that those items then turn their body fat a green color. So the green sea turtles tend to be slightly larger than our loggerheads. They can weigh up to about 400 pounds as well. So let's talk a little bit about what the crawl of each species looks like. So we know a little bit about the turtles and what they eat and what they look like. And you can probably tell in the photo at the left, because it's such a large turtle, that that's our leatherback sea turtle crawl. So our leatherback sea turtles use simultaneous flipper marks where they use both flippers to pull themselves up the beach. And usually it's in an S-shaped pattern. They don't just tend to go straight up because they're such a large turtle. It takes a lot of energy for them to get up onto the beach. And we always see down the middle, there's that line right down the middle, and that's from them dragging their tail down the middle of the crawl. If you look to the top right, you'll see our green sea turtle crawl. And that crawl uses the same flipper marks as the leatherback sea turtle. So you see that it leaves that simultaneous mark in the sand where those flippers are being used at the same time. And it does have a tail drag down the middle, but you can see it's more of like a dotted line or a dash mark because those turtles aren't quite as heavy. So their tail is hitting the sand, but not as much as our leatherback sea turtle. At the bottom right, we have our loggerhead, which is our most abundant nester. And they actually use a different gait. So they use an alternating flipper gait where they crawl up the beach and use one arm and then the other arm and then one arm again. You can see that these turtles are a bit lighter than our other species, so you do not see any tail drag down the middle of that crawl. So, some obstacles that our sea turtles face can be found on the beach. We also have obstacles that these turtles face while they're in the water. So, on the beach, we usually will see predators in action. Unfortunately, predators can impact our nesting females as well as the eggs that are incubating and the hatchlings. So, things like coyotes, fox, you see the raccoon pictured there, all different types and species of birds. As well, we have armadillos, possums, wild hogs. So pretty much any mammal that you see on the beach probably would eat a sea turtle egg. Other impacts include beach erosion. This is due to things like storms and hurricanes, as well as high tides. So the tides can wash up over the nest and actually wash some of the incubating eggs into the ocean or expose these eggs so that they're easier for these predators to come to get. Down at the bottom left there, you see ghost nets, which is just abandoned fishing gear, and then next to it, marine debris. So some of these items, they impact these turtles not only up on the beach, but also when they're in the water. So they can get stuck in these nets, both the adults and the hatchlings. It can impair them from diving down deep to forage for food or their ability to swim and get to the surface to come up for air. Our sea turtles are air breathing animals, so they need to come to the surface and get their breath every few minutes. At the bottom right here, you see some beach furniture. If you look towards the bottom of that photo, there actually is a turtle crawl that's leading up to that beach furniture. So you see the turtle crawl there at the bottom of the photo, and then it went around and hit these beach chairs. So all of that furniture, if it's left out overnight, it can impact not only our nesting females, but also hatchlings trying to make their way to the water can potentially get stuck in that beach furniture as well. Some of the marine obstacles. So we already talked about how marine debris and fishing nets and fishing line can impact our turtles in the water. We also have things like boat strikes. Sometimes boat strikes will cause what we call a prop wound, where it's a big laceration like you see pictured there. The turtles can also get hit by the hull of the boat that can cause a lot of damage for our turtles. So some other issues that we have for our sea turtles in the water are entanglement issues, where they will get caught in those lines. As we mentioned, if they aren't able to come up for air, they will actually drown. So even recreational fishing can be damaging for our turtles. Sometimes that monofilament fishing line can get entangled and wrapped around their flippers. And then they also sometimes will either ingest hooks or get hooked either in a flipper or near their neck or head area. And you can see in that bottom left photo that there's actually a hook in the esophagus of that turtle. So if that turtle is lucky, it may get an opportunity to go to rehab and hopefully have that hook removed. But we can, never know if that's going to happen and if we'll be able to get that turtle there or not. So this slide is pretty interesting. I wanted to put this together for you guys so that you got a bit of an impact on how important our nesting beaches are in the state of Florida. So this represents our loggerhead nesting over just the last 3 years. So for 2021 to 2023. And these are for some of our most populated survey areas that EAI completes surveys on. So you see that, 2021 and 2022 were pretty okay years, but consistently for all these areas, 2023 was a record-breaking year for our loggerhead sea turtles. And this is consistent with statewide nesting trends. So this was over the whole state of Florida, as well as multiple other states in the United States had very high nesting years for loggerheads as well. In the state of Florida, not only was it a record-breaking year for our loggerhead sea turtles, but also for our green sea turtles as well. So both had a really great nesting year last year. So what exactly is suitable nesting habitat, and how can we make sure that these turtles have this for the summer? So what we ask of you and what we, tell everyone that lives or visits coastal environments is please try to keep the beach dark, flat, and clean. Dark meaning after 9 is turtle time. That's the kind of the advice that we give to people. So from 9 o'clock p.m. until sunrise the next morning, please close your blinds and turn all of your external lights off. You can keep the beach flat by making sure that you knock down sandcastles and fill in holes. You can also remove any furniture or belongings you might have brought to the beach. We see a lot of, kids' toys left out on the beach and things like that. Even some big mounds of trash or something like that can be an obstacle for a sea turtle. So again, also keep the beach clean, and that just means removing that trash, picking up any debris, and making sure that that beach furniture is removed from the beach as well. So the life cycle of our sea turtle, because these are such awesome creatures, is referred to as the incredible journey. So what exactly does that mean? First, these eggs incubate in the sand, and this can be anywhere from about 45 to 85 days, and that depends on the species of sea turtle. So each species incubates for a different period of time. These hatchlings then, hopefully once they hatch, will start making their way to the ocean. They will start their crawl down the beach, and once they get to the water, they will start to go into what we call a frenzy. So they start to swim as fast as they can, making their way out miles offshore to the sargassum weed line. This is where they tend to feed and forage, and they have some shelter and protection in that weed line. And then we encounter something researchers refer to as the lost years. So this is a period of time where we don't exactly know what the turtles are doing or where they're going. We kind of just know that they are feeding out there and growing up. And then they tend to go into their foraging grounds, which can be different for different species. Some of them live in more coastal inshore habitats, whereas others like the leatherback sea turtle live out in the pelagic or open ocean habitats. Once they hit about 25 to 30 years, they will reach reproductive maturity. At that time, they're able to mate, and then those females will come up ashore to lay their eggs. Here we just have a few photos of our hatchlings. So the left-hand side, you can see the loggerhead hatchling. We see the green sea turtle up in the top right, and then our leatherback sea turtle at the bottom right. So you can see these species all look very, very different. It's pretty easy to identify the hatchlings based on species. So we're going to talk a little bit about why it is so important for these hatchlings to crawl down the beach. These turtles actually crawl down the beach and imprint on the sand. So as they're imprinting on the sand, that kind of gives them instructions on where to come back to nest. So as these hatchlings come out of the nest, they usually are crawling toward a downward slope, and they're moving away from dark silhouettes and trying to find the brightest light on the horizon. Hopefully that light is the reflection of the moon and the stars on the horizon, on the water. But Joe is going to talk to you a little bit about what happens if that light source is from a different light.
All right, thank you, Lauren. See if I can get control back. All right, so as Lauren mentioned, sea turtles tend to prefer dark beaches. However, there are still some that will nest on these brightly lit shores. So the way she described it was correct. They go towards the brightest horizon, which is normally the moon and the stars reflecting on the ocean. However, sometimes when you have some bright lights, as you can see here on this hotel, there can cause some confusion with these hatchlings and adult sea turtles. So when these adults, they nest on these brightly lit shores, the hatchlings seem to be the most affected by artificial light. And so they're misguided by this light, they're unable to find the water, and that makes them more susceptible to predation, dehydration, and which is not good for those hatchlings. So those visual cues that the hatchlings use to find the ocean is a very complex system, and it can be impacted by the brightness, the color of the light, the shape of the beach. So measuring light pollution in a way that kind of captures the impacts of turtles can be kind of difficult. So we use a simple rule when we try to evaluate lights, and this is guidance from FWC. And if the light from an artificial source is visible to a person standing on the beach, then that light is likely to cause problems for sea turtles that nest there. So if you can see the light from the beach, that light is traveling from that bulb to your eyes where the beach is, and that can be an issue for sea turtles. So we have two ways we kind of classify issues for sea turtles. We have disorientation and misorientation, and that's the evidence we find during our morning surveys that there may be a lighting issue in the area. So this photo on the left is an example of a disorientation, so where artificial light have interfered with these hatchlings' ability to orient, and so it kind of caused them to go in all these multiple directions trying to find their way to the ocean. The more times, the longer they're out there on the beach, the more chances they are to get predation or dehydrate. So now on the right-hand side, this is an example of a misorientation in which you see the tracks of an adult loggerhead, in which the artificial light has caused that turtle to move in the wrong singular direction. So after she nested, she went up where she would have went right back into the ocean. However, this turtle was eventually able to find the ocean on her own, but this is not always the case. And occasionally we find turtles in the road or behind the dune, and that requires assistance during our morning surveys. So many counties have realized the importance of keeping their beaches dark to help our sea turtles. So they've created or adopted sea turtle protection ordinances to cover lighting issues that they may find along their coastal properties. So you can see on this map that not all counties have a sea turtle lighting ordinance, and not all lighting ordinances are actually created equal. And there can be some major differences between counties. So if your county is one is that not listed that have a sea turtle protection ordinance, FWC has developed a model lighting ordinance for counties to use, or if you want to compare the county you live in to FWC's model lighting ordinance, you can go out and check out the website, or you can just Google FWC model sea turtle lighting ordinance, and that should come up. And so these ordinances try to capture three main rules when it comes to sea turtle lighting. This is just a very simple explanation, but the first rule is to keep it low. And what that means is to keep the light as low to the ground as possible and to use the lowest wattage necessary for the needed purpose. The second rule is to keep it long. This means using a long wavelength bulb above 560 nanometers, such as an amber, orange, or red LED. And although long wavelength light is still visible to sea turtles, it appears to affect both hatchlings and adult sea turtles less than those, bright short wavelength lights, such as your bright white and blue lights. And the last rule is to keep it shielded. So this means using downward directed fixtures with shields so that the lamps or the lenses are not visible from the beach. Now, this is not only important for turtles, but it's important for human safety as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit later. So if you're interested in retrofitting a condo you live at, a home on the water, FWC has a wildlife certification program in which they certify lights for installation in coastal properties. Now, there's some conditions that need to be met with some of these installation of these lights. For instance, some parking lot fixtures they've certified can be mounted at a height no more than 12 feet, or there's some wall-mounted fixtures that aren't approved for floors above the first or second level of a high-rise building. So if you're interested in retrofitting or purchasing some of these certified products, again, find it on FWC's website. Look at, FWC Wildlife Certified Lighting in Google. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions about lighting is that, the brighter, the lighter the light, the safer the area is going to be. That is definitely not the case. And the type of light and the positioning of the light is just as important, if not more important. So in this example, you have some improper lighting. You see a very bright floodlight is casting some shadows behind it and produces some glare when you look at it. Now, with some proper shielding, just by putting your hand up, you can reduce or eliminate that glare, and you can see that person that was hiding in plain sight, where that shadows are being cast and the glare being produced by that light. So not only is proper shielding important for sea turtles, it can be important for human safety and security as well. So we aim to be proactive in our approach to sea turtle conservation rather than reacting to those disorientation and misorientations that we find during the morning surveys. And to do that, we need to go out at night and identify all those potentially disruptive lights along the coastline. Now, we found these fully integrated GPS that has an attached laser rangefinder, and they've been able to actually enhance our capabilities in performing these nighttime lighting surveys. So this unit allows us to take a point where we're standing on the beach. It takes a low resolution photo, and then using that laser rangefinder, we're able to actually point it at the light source and get an exact GPS location of where that light source was coming from. So at night, it can be very difficult to pinpoint where those lights are coming from. So this has been an amazing tool in helping property owners, identify those lights on their property and, eventually fixing those potentially disruptive lighting issues. So all the information we collect using that Trimble Geo 7X can be imported into a database we created. And we have these reports that are automatically generated. On the reports, we'll include information about the property, including the address, the date and time the observation was observed. Next on the report, we have some information about the type of light. For example, here we have a street light. There's also a problem code that we give to all the light sources in which the light is rated based on the intensity and the area of the beach that is visible from. And then we give some recommendations on how that light can come into compliance with the local lighting ordinance. In this case, adding a shield and replacing with a full cutoff fixture and a long wavelength bulb. Next, you can see we give a descriptive location and a GPS location of that light source. But I think the most important parts of these reports is the photo of the light. Really gives you a picture of what the offending light is. And then the reports also have an aerial image that is showing the location on the beach in which the light was observed, the location of the light source on the property, and that's all connected with a yellow vector showing the line of sight. So these reports have been instrumental in helping property owners who most of the time don't even know that there is an issue, and it allows them to come into compliance and keep the beaches dark. And this has led to our beaches, having some of the lowest disorientation rates in the entire state of Florida. So in addition to the reports that we send out to the counties and the property owners, each county receives an interactive map showing the lighting issues within their county or municipality. So it kind of gives them a full picture of what's going on their beaches. So here's a little video showing how these interactive maps work. So you can see, you can kind of pan around, zoom into the actual point on the beach where that lighting issue was observed. If you click on the point on the beach, you can see it brings up a box. If you want to enhance the image, you can open the image and show you, what I was seeing that night of the lighting survey. And then you can also click on each one of those points and it will give you all the metadata associated with that lighting report. So everything that was included in those reports kind of pops up in these little boxes showing you, the location of the light, and everything, all the metadata associated with that report. So just another tool for counties to kind of figure out what's going on their beaches and, the amount of lighting issues that they have to deal with. So Lauren will take over from here.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm sure you're wondering, we're just about at the end here, but how can you help sea turtles? A lot of these things we've already talked about, but just to reiterate, when you're visiting the beach or if you live at the beach, please make sure that you're cleaning up trash. Take home your beach furniture and beach toys. Again, we always say try to take more than you came with. So if you're able to bring a trash bag or just throw a few things away on your way out, that's really helpful. Filling in those holes and knocking down those sandcastles from March 1st through October 31st, making sure that you aren't, shoving umbrellas into the ground during that time. If you need to place an umbrella in the sand, doing it below the high tide line or digging down first to make sure there's nothing there and placing the umbrella is your best bet. Use caution when boating. Make sure that you have a spotter. You also would want to use polarized sunglasses so that you aren't hitting not only sea turtles, but other animals like dolphins and whales and things as well. We also have manatees that are in our waters, and they are very subject to getting hit by boats as well. Recycling that monofilament fishing line, if you look at that photo with the blue sign and the PVC piping, if you see those at different piers or, access points, that is where you can recycle that fishing line. Even if you don't live in a coastal environment, you can definitely help by doing things like reducing the amount of single-use plastics that you're using or recycling the plastics when you do use them. Buying sustainable seafood and knowing where that seafood is sourced from, and then using reusable grocery bags. As Joe mentioned through his whole presentation, please make sure that we're turning off any unnecessary lighting and closing those blinds during sea turtle nesting season. If you live in the state of Florida, you can jot down this phone number here. This is a hotline that will get you a direct link to FWC, and you will be able to report any type of sea turtle issues, whether it's a disturbance of a nesting female or the eggs, or a turtle that washes up with some type of injury or that is deceased. So you can call this hotline. They will send you to a dispatcher who will send out either a local permit holder or a law enforcement agent to respond to that situation, depending what's needed. So if you want to get involved in conservation, one of the greatest things you can do is what you all are doing right now is educating yourselves. There's tons of different programs you can donate to. You can volunteer your time, but also just creating behavior change and living more sustainably and sharing that with friends and family is a huge way that you can contribute to sea turtle conservation. So we are actually all complete now. If anyone has any questions, Joe or I would be more than happy to answer those for you.
So you guys are welcome to put your questions into the chat box. And then when I see them pop up, I can relay them to Lauren and Joe if you guys do have anything. So while we're waiting to see if questions come in, before we had started our Zoom call today, we were kind of talking about how nesting season is going so far, since it has already begun. So do you want to tell us how things are going? Y'all are only a little bit north of us, but You're starting to see turtles on the beach already, right?
Yeah, definitely. So as we mentioned in the presentation, March 1st was the day that we started our regular surveying. So we'll survey every day. But prior to that, we had a few nests laid in February. So to date, we are at about 16 leatherback sea turtle nests. We had a few in Martin County. We had one in Palm Beach County, and we're still waiting for nests in St. Lucie and Indian River County right now.
That's awesome. So I'm not seeing any questions come into the chat box. Forgive me if you mentioned this and I missed it. Did you talk about why last year the season went so well throughout the state? Are there any theories on that?
So, Joe, do you have anything for that question?
So, so it takes them about 20 to 30 years to reach maturity. And the Endangered Species Act was enacted about that time when they should all be coming, so when these protections were put in place, they are now coming to of age where they would, be coming back to nest. That's one theory. It could be an alignment of, so some of the turtles nest every 2 to 3 years. So those ones that were nesting every 2 years are matching up with those ones that nest every 3 years. And it became, kind of a increase from previous year's highs. And yeah,
I didn't
what's
even think
going on.
about that with the Endangered Species Act. That's a good point to bring up.
Yeah. And I think the important thing to realize is just for everyone that when we look at these nesting trends, we don't look at, 1 year like, oh, last year was incredible, so these species are doing great. We look at these trends over long periods of time, sometimes 10 to 15 years. And across the board, when we look at those trends, we see an upward trend line for most of these species that they are doing a little better. So it's still important that we have these protections in place and we're still doing everything we can to conserve them. But the work we're doing is paying off, I think.
Awesome. So I didn't see any questions come into the chat. So again, thank you to both for coming and joining us for this presentation today. Do you want to share with everyone where they can follow along with the work that EAI is doing?
Yeah, so we are on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a company website. If you'd like to, just Google us, you can find that pretty easily. We do a lot of different outreach programs through the summer. So if you either live up here locally or you're not too far away and you'd like to come out, we advertise those all on social media as well.
All right, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
so-
you guys so much again. Oh, go ahead, Joe. Did you want to say something?
Teresa direct messaged me.
Oh, okay.
And she asked about any online workshops that we do. So we don't do much online. A lot of the public education we do out there is our hatchling hike program in St. Lucie County, our public excavations on Jensen Beach, like Lauren talked about. We do nighttime turtle walks, and I guess the best way to find out about all that is go onto our social media where we have all that stuff. Anything else you want to talk about that, Lauren?
Yeah. Well, so we will try to stream some of our public excavation programs on social media. So if you're able to follow us on there, you can, probably join us for one of those. We partner with a couple different organizations on those programs. So the ones we do in the city of Delray Beach, those are almost always streamed live. So those are a good one to tune in for. And then we'll try to also internally stream a few other ones.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys again. And thanks to all of you who tuned in live and for everyone that's watching this replay. We will be posting the recording of this presentation on our YouTube channel. So if you guys do want to refer back to anything that Joe and Lauren talked about, you will be able to watch everything again or share it with friends and family so you can help spread the word about sea turtle season here in Florida. And then again, they mentioned their social media channels. If you guys, this is your first time interacting with South Florida Wildlife Center, we also have a social media, or lots of social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, as well as YouTube, that you guys can go and learn more about what we do at our center with our wildlife hospital. And then of course, watch all of our recordings for our wild lecture series. I do want to send out the invitation to all of you that are watching this. It is March 7th, and tomorrow, March 8th, we actually have a fundraiser here locally in Fort Lauderdale. So if you guys are interested in joining us for that, all the information is on our social media. But thank you guys so much, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you again, Lauren and Joe.
All right. Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.